Welcome to TAP, to everyone out there who's listening, and welcome to you, spiritual advisor Rizama.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Me too. I have been writing with you. We've been writing with each other, and that is such an experience because you're certainly also a writer. And I don't know, you just mentioned before we started recording here that Rizama is actually more of your pen name. So maybe you want to tell people your name. It's been a bit, you have different names. I like that actually, because it makes it like you're not too attached to a name. That's kind of my ideology. So, but let me know what names people can find you under.
Yeah, absolutely. So names are such a funny thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
The way that we label ourselves or are labeled by others. So my full name is MaRiza Noyama-Zee. And MaRiza is a Portuguese name, which means from the ocean. And so my mom is Chinese, but she grew up in Brazil for the second half of her childhood. And so it's a Brazilian. She knows that name from Brazil. And my father, when I was in utero and my mom was pregnant with me, had a dream that he was picking up a baby girl and he called her MaRiza. And when he told my mom that name, she said, "Oh, that's such a white girl name. I mean, can we make it more interesting? How about MaRiza?" So they gave me this name that confuses people and it makes people, it's got a Z in the middle of it instead of an S. And so people are very hitched up by it. It's actually a rather hard name to say with an American accent, MaRiza. I know it just kind of doesn't roll off the tongue. And so since I was very young, probably middle school, grammar school era, but definitely by high school, people were calling me Riz or Riza. And I like that. I like Riza. And so I've gone by that for most of my life. And then my maiden name used to be Baker. That's my father's last name.
Baker.
But my married Baker,
yeah,
which is, so I had a very unusual first name and a very unusual last name.
Yeah.
Baker, almost no one gets confused about Baker. It's spelled exactly the way it sounds.
Yeah.
It's a thing, a person who bakes, it's okay. But hilariously, when I got married, I adopted a very unusual name that I think probably no one else has, which is a combination of my Chinese last name, Zee, Z-E-E, and my co-parents' Japanese last name, Noyama. And so my family, I'm half Chinese, and his family, he's a quarter Japanese. And this was a really big deal to us because in the Asian culture, and especially in the culture of the 20th century, both of our families are from, China and Japan, like during World War II, where those countries were at war. And so our grandparents, and to some degree, our parents' generation were really products of that war. And so for us to get married, it was like this and have children together, which is really why we came together, was this sort of expression that love kind of can heal hate or heal trauma. And so we decided to make our last name Noyama-Zee hyphenated, which also, I don't know if you do hyphens in your country, but here it's actually very annoying. It's a very annoying thing to have. It does. There's a lot of systems that get very, like when you go to the airport, you can't always use the kiosks, like, oh, hyphens. We don't understand hyphens.
Okay.
It's like,
right.
And so in the evolution of my name,
yeah,
I discovered that, recently, I discovered that I have this sort of realization with spirit that I look at the center of things, that my nature as a being is to really try to find the center of each thing and grow that, right? And so that's something that I could talk at length about because it's really a trip that I've been on, is sort of like growing the essence of a thing.
Yeah.
And I realized that the very middle of my first name is Riz, and the very middle of my last name is Ama. And if you put those together, it's Rizama, which is also, if you take the M-A off the beginning of my name and put it at the end of my name, is also Rizama or Rizama. And this is a nickname my spirit teacher had been calling me for the last 18 years.
Okay.
So in old letters that I still have that she's written me, I will find, she writes my name Rizama or Rizama.
Okay.
Which also in Spanish means Riz loves. So,
there is so much in that name. Oh my God, that is.
I decided to do
Yeah.
that.
Right. So people can call you whatever.
Whatever, Riz, Riza,
Right.
Nama.
I
Yeah.
like that. I
If
like
they
that.
really want to say Marisa, they can do that too. Yeah.
I always say that to people that because people can get nervous of how to say mana or mana or mana or something, and I'm just like whatever you feel like because I'm so into that kind of distancing yourself. I mean, there can be so much in the words, and that's really beautiful. What you're just describing, that's very valuable. But also that we are not the name.
Yeah. Yeah, that sense of detachment.
Yeah.
Again, I like flexibility or openness,
Yeah.
right? About ourselves and our identity and the way that we're showing up at this particular time and place. Like,
Yeah.
that is important.
It's
But
an
it's also
identity.
everything.
It's not everything. It's part of the personality. Yeah. Okay, but so we decided in our email exchange, to talk about a through line transformation because we're both very much into that. You have the full awakening.net website. You have the will where people can find your text, your writings, and on one of those sites, I found this quote. Just see, we are here to help make the invisible visible. And the reason why I love that is because you have Taurus in your 12th house. And that is so astrologer good. That sentence, making the invisible in the 12th house visible into form with Taurus. And it's not easy. I mean, in a way, it is like the sentence it's like why we're all, here. But for you, it's more of a life mission, if you will. It's like a constant. Do you resonate with that? I'm just claiming.
No, I do. I do. I think it's a great sentence. That sentence is on my website.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a really great way of describing what I try to do, and what a spirit has sort of been urging me to do since I started having spirit experiences at the age of 10.
At the age of 10. It is so young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like this knocking on the door to sort of show me and remind me that there's so much happening beyond what we can visibly see with our human eyes, and that it's important, that we're working in collaboration with these unseen forces, and that's a greater reality we're being invited to than just sort of this very pragmatic, cynical, literal, world that we are taught is real. There's much more that is real, that is beyond seeing.
Have you remembered that all through your life from 10 until now? Have you remembered that? Really? You're nodding? Okay. Because I mean, that's something that I've forgotten often because it's just so much easier to see what's right here in the concrete everyday reality and then get a little bit in doubt, what is true about the invisible. But no doubt that in me at least, that we've gone through a collective awakening as well. And more people, it's easier now because more people are talking about it. So it's easier for me as well to lean into it. Okay, there's something here in the invisible that's a major influence on what happens in the practical realm. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm really lucky because, I mean, it's so interesting what you're saying, because that hasn't been my experience. Because I would say that, up to a certain point in my path, I had periodic epochs of very strange experiences that were beyond the ordinary reality that sort of kind of opened that door, right? Or sort of cracked the facade of this sort of what you're talking about, the sort of callus that builds, we're just like kind of going through our daily life and things don't seem magical and they seem very regular, right?
Exactly.
And I would say that continued for the first 16 years of my journey with spirit. Just these epochs, like every few months, something so strange. And like, the ghost story sort of like phantomy, like just really wacky, fun stories would happen to me every few months. Like, oh my God, this again. Like, what is happening? And then 16 years after that initial contact, I found my teacher and I started training in the work that I do. And ever since then, I've had fewer and fewer, like what I call out of the box experiences, like those experiences that just kind of crack my reality open and remind me, oh, there's so much more happening. And it's because I'm actually working with this so much more intentionally every single day, and it's become a part of my work. So in order to be able to do the work I do with my clients, I have to sink into that level or that dimensionality of reality where I'm actively connecting with spirit and the spirit, the spirits that surround the people I'm working with and the consciousness, sort of grid or the consciousness field. Like I'm consciously going into that space with the something more. And so my contact with them kind of coming into my life has become more just a constant reality, for me.
I see.
Dual reality, multi-reality.
Yeah.
And much subtler. Like those influences are much subtler and softer, less shocking, less like a cracking, and more of just like a
right. So you've had these cracks, these huge experiences that maybe were needed at the time to keep you confirmed in what you were sensing, and now you say you're just soaked in it and it's really subtle and you're like constantly working in it. And I know that words kind of escape us here. I mean, it's hard to describe these kind of things, but please do please do try to use words about it. I mean, first of all, what were the kind of shocking experiences? If you feel like sharing any one of those.
Sure. It's funny because one of my, an acquaintance, a community connection, named Geraldine, she's in France and she just started writing a Substack. She's been a client of mine, to some degree, but more, we're all cohorts, right? We're all kind of doing this work together. She's also a writer, and I also encouraged her to start a Substack. Because I've so enjoyed my Well. The Well is the publication that I publish each month, and it's through Substack, and I find Substack to be such a clear platform. But the reason I'm saying it is that I was on her site the other day and she was telling a ghost story.
Okay.
She called it ghost story, and I was like, ooh, ghost story. And, at the end, she sort of is like, what's happened to you? Like, as a reader, like, what's happened in your life? And I was like, oh my God. And I just had this, sometimes a question just kind of pulls a thread, but like the whole little necklace of incidences come out. And so I was thinking about that. I'm like, I should speak to that more. I should tell people more of those stories, because even though there's something that's so well integrated sort of into my life now, but they don't seem sensational, I think even in the telling of them, sometimes it can be activating for people to hear, those experiences imagined. So the one that comes to mind is really number one, is the first level of contact. And I was 10. And we lived in this very old apartment in the north side of Chicago. And it was a very strange apartment. It had like a kind of a front end, more of a formal end, and then it had a back end. And the back end was like, there was like a servant, like a bedroom and a bathroom for a servant.
Okay.
And like the kitchen was back there, and like kind of the informal living room. And in the front was like the formal, like sort of gathering space, or what would be like the dining room. My parents used it as their art studio.
Oh.
Or my mother used it as her art studio. And in the middle were these 2 bedrooms and a Jack and Jill bathroom, and the longest hallway you can imagine, the longest, darkest hallway. So a Jack and Jill bathroom has like 2 or more doors, and this one had 3 doors. It was very strange. So it was 1 bedroom, and then the other bedroom, and in between the bathroom, a door to each bedroom and a door to the hallway. So we blocked that door to the hallway off because it was just too many dang doors for one bathroom. Energetically very unsound. It's really designed. And so this hallway, I just remember as a kid, this hallway had like seemingly no lights in it. It was long, it was dark, and it was hardwood floors. And I remember I was looking for my mother. It was in the evening. It was very dark. And I was in the back where we mostly hung out, in the back of the apartment. But I couldn't find her back there. So I was calling for her. And I was wearing socks on my feet, so it's slippery on the hardwood floor. And I was kind of going down the hallway, and I got that familiar sort of prickly feeling.
Yeah.
Just like fear and
Yeah.
I don't know, energy, right? Like some sort of energetic, staticky, sort of alerting feeling in my body. And I got really scared.
Mhm.
And so I was screaming and like running down the hallway, Mom, 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 where are you? And I rounded the corner in the front of the apartment. And so we had the front door, which we pretty much never used. That was like across from me. And then as I rounded the corner, there was a second door that was like the closet door where you would put coats and shoes and whatnot. And the closet door had a full-length mirror on it. And so I was really positioned between these two doors, trying to get into the door to the bedroom, my parents' bedroom. And all of a sudden, there was this flash of light, like someone had turned the headlights of a car on.
Okay.
And I first registered it in my right eye, which is the closet door. And then I realized it was a reflection off the mirror. And so then I turned to my left, and there was, I call them now pillar spirits, but at that time, what I would describe is a luminous, male-esque humanoid figure who was about 10 feet tall and just filling the entire, like, floor to ceiling, sort of the height of the floor to ceiling, and just this bright white light, like pure white light, and just filling the whole space. And I got hit with this, all this emotion.
Yeah. What kind of emotion?
Because like compassion, tenderness, grief, in Buddhism, they call it the true heart of bodhicitta, so it's like this heart of tenderness, which is like a very bittersweet sort of feeling. It's a compassionate feeling, but it kind of hurts a little. That's the feeling that came into my body. And I froze. And that moment seemed to last, forever. It was probably, 10 seconds or something. And I just remember I couldn't breathe. And then all of a sudden, had this big breath. And I ran around the corner and I found my mom in the bathroom. She's brushing her teeth. And I was just like, all the color had drained out of me. She said that my skin was almost a green color. And I was just terrified. I was terrified. And I told her I had seen a ghost. And she said, I believe you.
Oh, that's a good mother.
I said, that is a good mother. But you know what I said to her? That's the wrong answer.
Oh.
I said, you're supposed to say it was just my imagination.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, no, I believe you.
Wow.
And so that started, we didn't really have context for it, right? There weren't options. It was like ghosts, demons, like we didn't even really go to that place of like angels, celestial beings. Like we didn't go there at all. We just went, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And so my parents built a big wooden cross and put it in that corner of the house. And we started praying every night. And, I think in my young mind, we really treated it like there was a ghost in the house that was like haunting us.
And your parents hadn't, I have so many questions. I have to interrupt you soon. So many questions. But so your parents, I mean, they seem pretty unusual in a good way, right? That they would take you up on it, take you serious, even though they hadn't experienced it themselves?
Well, that's the thing. So years and years later, so this was a really big epoch. It was very scary, but it just became a story that we told. So it sort of sunk into the level like family myth.
Yeah. Good.
And it mellowed over time. And I really convinced myself, that was just like this anomaly, but it made a great story, right? And so then every time we told the story, though, my mom and my stepfather would sort of exchange looks. And I got this sense like there's more that you're not telling me about this story. And I remember when I was 16, we were visiting Washington, D.C. We were visiting some friends down there. And then we were telling the story. And I saw this look pass between my mom and my stepfather. And I was like, what is it? Like, what is it that you're not telling me about this story? Because we've told it a few times now. And every time there's this look. Like, I'm 16. I'm like a full-grown human, obviously, at this point, right? So, yeah, in my own mind, I'm like, I can handle it, whatever it is. And they were like, there is this other thing. So a few months before that, I used to visit my biological dad, my birth father, in California for the summers. And my parents would be alone during that time. And my mom had been walking from the back of the apartment to the front of the apartment to go to her art studio. And she had described herself as sort of, she was daydreaming. She was kind of, she's an artist, so she was riding the waves, the visionary waves in her mind. She claimed she wasn't really paying attention. And all of a sudden she walked into a wall. And this was very odd. So she kind of stepped back, and it was this figure standing in the door. There's a, big open archway to the front room, that formal front room. So there was no wall there. It was the door and the archway, and it was open. So she walked straight into him, and it felt to her like a wall. And she saw this, 10-foot glowing man and got terrified. She'd never had an experience like that before in her life. And so she ran to the back of the apartment, found my stepfather, didn't tell him what she had saw, but just said, Sam, can you walk me to the front room? And he was like, yeah, okay, sure. I know my parents are going to listen to this interview later and I'm interested to hear if this is how they remember the story, but this is how I remember the story. So he walked her to the front room. They didn't see the being. And she kind of just tucked it away. I was like, I'm not going to say anything about that until it happened to me. And so when it happened to me and I described the exact same thing she had seen, that's when she told my stepfather, and they were like, we have to take this seriously. Okay. This is a thing. Right? And so there was that legitimizing sort of second contact that they had been living with all those years. So there had been 2 contacts. It never happened again.
It never happened again. Okay.
It never happened again in that apartment. I did that period of time in my life, though, is when my dream time got activated. So I became an active dreamer during that time. And that became a way that I was journeying sort of off planet into different realms in dreams. And some very influential sort of repeated dreams happened during that time, mostly nightmares. And 2 repeated nightmares kept happening. And in the timeline of it all, I feel like the meaning came after the dreams had sort of been activated and was protecting me and sort of activating other parts of me so that I could sort of survive those dreams, because those dreams are really terrifying at that time. But dream time is definitely a place, like a shamanic sort of realm for me. It's where I do a lot of my work, is in the dream time realms. So
okay, can
at the end of the story is that when I found out that there was the second contact, then the doors of experiences opened, and I started having a lot more strange, occurrences after that.
Occurrences that then became the new normal
or the regular thing. Yeah.
Oh man, it's really hard to listen to without because I had also just have like basic questions here, because I can't help to think about 10 years old. I don't have any memories from it, and it's also because of quite a traumatic background, but I don't have memories. I don't know how it is to remember anything when you're 10 years old, and I know other people will share that experience of not remembering. How is it that you can remember this? I mean, I guess some people just do, or, I mean...
Yeah, I think memory is such an interesting thing. It's fascinating to me, but my experience of this lifetime and in this body is one of a lot of memory. So I can remember being an infant. I can remember being pre-verbal. That is a very unusual experience.
Wait, okay.
I believe I can remember my birth. And I remember past lives as well. So memory is definitely something that
oh my gosh,
I have an unusual relationship with. Maybe.
So tell me, it's because some people remember past lives and maybe their birth and infancy from regression work. Is that what you're talking about? So how?
Well, so yes, the past life memories did start to come in through regression work.
Okay.
But the early life memories I've always had. I've never
No.
lost those early life memories.
Oh, wow. That's a lot. So you can remember being a baby, and it just never went away for you. Wow. That is, I think that is really something. I mean, that's a part of your ability, or your gift somehow. What do you think it serves?
You know, it's interesting. In the healing work that I do, I work a lot with people's, what we commonly call inner children.
Mm.
I think a big part of my theory on healing, which is a primary aspect of transformation and awakening, I think
Yeah.
is healing and integration,
Yeah.
um, is becoming a really, I call it radical self-inclusivity. So
Yeah.
radical self-inclusivity means being able to like include and welcome and create like an ecosystem of belonging inside of yourself with all of your former, current, and future selves. And if your world works this way, parallel or other dimensional, other timeline selves, right? So that can get very broad.
Yeah.
Can be very, very, nuggety in a person's life, and just being like, I am able and willing to integrate and connect with the child part of me, the young adult part of me, even the baby part of me, And so it depends on where a person's trauma is and where they're missing sort of times of themselves, parts of themselves that are really suffering. Being able to identify where those parts are and know what those parts need is a really important part of this radical self-inclusivity, community of internal belonging project that I feel like I work on with people. And so for me, not only being a mother of young children and having learned how to parent and care for young children as an adult, that's helped me. But also remember being a very young child, remember being a baby, remember being a toddler, remembering being a young child, all those things that can be very spotty in people's recollections of themselves. I remember how it feels. Like I remember what thoughts I was having or what emotions I was having or how I was interpreting the world around me. And it's very interesting to remember what it feels like to interpret the world before you have words. Before you have language. It's a very different thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like it helps my work. It may be part of the reason that I have it.
Yeah, I mean, very apropos what we were talking about with names. You're saying before we had words, right? Like, what is that thing that we can't describe? And before we have an identity. So it's kind of that sphere that you're navigating in a lot of your work, I guess, because when we want to have the radical self-inclusivity, we have to transcend whatever we identified with, right? And so if you can remember a time before you were the you that was formed in early stages of development, then there's some connection there somehow.
No, for sure. I think the thing is, like what you're talking about identity, right? Like it's almost a question of like, is there a self before there's identity? Right. And I would say adamantly yes. Right. I have a sense of myself as a consciousness, like as a specific point in consciousness before I had what I would call the ego or the personality, I think a lot in terms of like an infinity sign. So I'm going to make this physical gesture that you can see and your listeners will not be able to see.
Yeah.
But if you think of an infinity sign stretching between me and you, let's say, there's the point of inflection, right? The sort of point of inflection is like the middle of the infinity sign. It's where it crosses itself, right? And I would say that's the distance at which we build the identity, the constructed identity. That's the place where we sort of add our identity, our personality, our way that we think about ourselves, or the way we like to present ourselves, the way we like to be perceived. And we build that in childhood at some point, and throughout our lives, we build that. And it is when we're very young and vulnerable, it's our protection, right? And a lot of times it's informed by what other people say about us. Oh, you're really good at this, or like, you don't like this. The adults in our lives have so much power, and other children at some point have so much power to help us shape that thing
definitely.
that stands between us and everybody else, right? Now, the problem with that is that when we get to a certain age, it's just this like collection of stuff that sometimes loses its context. We don't even remember why we started feeling or thinking that way about ourselves, but we know it feels like it keeps us safe, and it also keeps us separate from others.
So what's in the inner circle? There's 2 circles, right? Then there's the inner circle. What's in that?
Well, so the circles of the infinity sign is the sort of what's the curiosity is what's inside the circle.
Yeah.
Right. Like what's inside my personal circle, and how deep can I get? How deep can I pull my side of the infinity sign so that I can find some sense of essence or primary consciousness? Right. In internal family systems, they call this the central self, I believe, or some people call it their higher self or their essence self. Right. And I think of it like a little seed, in the center of a fire, maybe, or the center of the soil. And like, it's something that we nourish or we water. The seed image, it used to be fire, but now I'm using the seed image. I like the seed. It's a sort of dormant seed that we're sort of trying to hydrate and encourage to grow. So the idea in transformational healing work is that you're finding that you're healing whatever internal dynamics are happening for you so that can begin to grow and inhabit more of you. And as that happens, and as you start to emanate that outward, this interface, the inflection point in the infinity sign that holds all of our identity information of what we've constructed or what has been constructed for us, that starts to crack and fall away. And so that's something that can be really scary for someone as they enter into a transformational field, as they enter into healing work with themselves, is that those identifiers start to like kind of shift and change. But they have to, so that people can see us clearly, the us that's inside, right? It's the most essential eternal self, that part gets to come out and be an active participant in our adult lives. And also so that we can see the other person clearly.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
And so it becomes, in this infinity sign thing, ideally what that inflection point is like, is a window into true identity, true essence, true consciousness. And also the ability to, I care for you and I care for me. Like this mutuality, of like how we can flow back and forth. I see me, I see you, I care for me, I care for you. And that mutuality is found all throughout nature. It's like biomimicry, it's a hot topic right now. But like, how can we look at the world of the real, which in my opinion is nature? It's the real world. And how can we apply that to how we're working with ourselves? And so that sense of mutuality and cooperation between inner and outer is something that's really inherent in our nature. I would say before the construction of my identity, before words even, I had a definite consciousness. Like I experienced myself as a consistent consciousness, even from infancy. And what you experience before words is emotion and sensation. You experience emotion and sensation. And so you don't necessarily have a framework for what that means, right? But you know what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And you know what feels like safety and what feels like danger, right? And I feel like the other thing that I had very early on was a deep, deep sense of my conscious connection with the elements. So my conscious connection with the sun and with the being that is the sun, and feeling the sun touching my skin was some of my earliest memories of like joy and pleasure. And of course, being with my mom, being close to my mom, these feelings of safety and nurturance, but my connection to the earth was such a vibrant, alive thing from a very early age. And I think we tend to lose that, but probably we all come in like that, that we feel very seen by the world.
It's very amazing that you didn't lose it. That must have set you up for a path that was quite different. and with special abilities. Like I mentioned, I feel like many of us are awakening to it now, but having that recollection backwards, that's pretty amazing. I mean, there's something here that you're really supposed to do. Do you feel that the healing you were talking about, the radical self inclusivity and the transformational work is what you really are here to offer other people, or what do you feel is your life mission? What's the purpose of all of this that you've gone through?
That's a great question. I definitely, I'm definitely a guide and a healer.
Yeah.
I think that's a part of my function. It's a funny thing, people ask children a lot, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? I don't know. Do they ask that where you're from?
Yeah, yes,
what do you want to do?
Yeah.
We're very focused on like the vocational expression of our self, and sometimes even like in an existential sort of way. It's like, my mission is what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
But I think a more asked question would be, who do you want to be?
Yeah.
Or who do you want to become? And I think that all of us are in the process of becoming. And the impact of that becoming can show up in everything that we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether we're parenting or whether we have a certain vocation, showing up for a paycheck, or our livelihood, or whether we're walking down the street or we're in a cafe and interacting. The who are we being and how that shows up is really, I think, significant. And so I would say that, for me, I have the greatest joy in being in a healing space with people, and a guiding space with people. I absolutely love that. But I also think, we're all here to help. And for me, the most important help that I can offer is becoming a really increasingly healed and loving human.
For sure.
And being able to be whole and joyous and connective in every situation that I show up in, so that we're energetically learning from each other all the time, right? So that energetic sort of signature or pulse that I send out as a increasingly healed human. And I don't know if we ever reach full healing.
Yeah, I get you.
Like an increasingly integrated whole human is that is something that I give, to the world, and that is really important to me.
No, I feel you on that. Sometimes I feel like all the dreams that I have of becoming this big interviewer, that's one of my dreams. Sometimes I'm like, no, man, what you're supposed to do is just recover. It's just freaking recover from all the trauma. It's just that, because that is an immense help to other people as well. So that's actually, for me, the biggest focus point is that the healing journey in general. But I want to just go back to, so you were having these unexpected occurrences, unusual occurrences, and then now that became part of your new normal to work with spirit somehow. But how did that development, how did it go from being like a ghost and this strange, probably luminous thing that you, like you were describing it, you were freezing, so also you had a nervous system reaction of like being afraid, to something that you could, I don't know, that you are in dialogue with, would you put it like that? And is it the same being? Was it a different being than what you are talking to now?
It's interesting. I mean, that fear response is definitely, it closes doors. And I think we're so trained to have a fear response in the presence of things we don't understand.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of I have another story to tell, because I think this actually really bookends the experience really well. So when I was 18, I had another big experience, undeniable experience with spirit. And in this experience, my parents were having some people over to look at our house, to paint our house. Some friends we were going to be going out of town and they were going to paint the walls of our house. And I was 18 and I had no interest of being a part of any of that. So I was in the back room watching a movie. And when I was watching the movie, the telephone started ringing. You know, and I'm ancient. So this is back in the day when telephones were attached to walls.
No, I'm from that age as well. You and me both. It's not very long ago.
It's not very long ago, really. You know, and so the phone, of course, was on. So you're on the other side of the apartment. And so the phone's ringing, the phone ringing. My parents and their friends are in between me and the phone, but they're busy. So they're not picking the phone up. So finally I'm like, oh, okay, pause my movie, go answer the phone. And as I enter the dining room kitchen area where my parents and their friends are, they're in the kitchen. There's this island kind of in the middle of the space, and then like a walkway next to that. And on the other side of that is the dining room table. So it's kind of the open concept-ish main food room, but it's also a throughway to get to the rest of the apartment. So I had to I had to travel down the center of it. And my parents and my friends were on one side of the island, and on the other side at the table there was a woman sitting, and she was maybe in her late 60s, early 70s, white hair, wearing all like kind of white clothes, kind of like a muslin-y, you know, maybe not like bright white, but like kind of whitish, off-white colored clothes. And she's sitting at the table, and she looked up at me as I was walking past and just gave me this amazing smile. And my heart just filled with love and familiarity. And it was like time stopped. And I just walked up to her and I was like, "Hello." And she held out her hand and I shook her hand, solid as anything. And she said, "My name is Catherine." And I said, "Hi, Catherine. My name's MaRiza. It's so nice to meet you." And she said, "It's really nice to meet you too." And there was just this moment of, I don't know, joy and reconnection, familiarity. You know, like this is someone I really wanted to talk to. But the phone kept ringing. The phone kept ringing. I'm like, "I'm so sorry. I'll be right back. I have to go answer this phone." So I run to the front of the apartment. I pick up the phone. There's no one on the line. It's like a dead phone. So I'm like, you know, whatever. So I hang up the phone. I go back and everybody's gone to a different part of the house. Yeah, I really wanted to talk to that woman more. There's something about her. I just wanted to know more. I wanted to have a conversation. So the night went on, the friends all left. And I said to my parents at the end of the night, "How did it go? You know, we're talking about the painting job and whatnot." And then I said, "Hey, who is that woman, the older woman here?" And they're like, "An older woman?" And I described Catherine, and they were like, "There was no older woman there." And I was like, no, she was sitting at the table. Like, you're all in the same room. Like, you were in the kitchen and the phone was ringing and I came through and they were like, they had no idea what I was talking about.
Oh, man.
Almost as if they didn't even, I mean, you think they would remember me talking to someone they couldn't see and sitting down at the table. They had no memory of any of it. It's almost like it happened in like a different like pocket reality or something.
Yeah,
Where they
sounds like it. Mm.
And of course, it freaks them out. They were like, "Do we have ghosts in this house too?" You know, and I was like, this was different. I mean, she was fully corporealized, you know? And so, you know, I had this amazing experience of love. I mean, both experiences, you know, in retrospect, the energy coming towards me was love and compassion. But this was a very human looking person that I felt very familiar with, and I felt very held by, you know, in a sense. And so I always say to people, like, when your curiosity becomes stronger than your fear,
Wow.
then you can really explore these things, right? And so at this point, my curiosity had become much stronger than my fear.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just want to know, you know? And so it turned out, you know, I had been meditating at that point. I started meditating when I was 13. And I've been meditating for some time. So I started meditating and connecting to her. And it turned out she was one of my guides. And so at this point, I work with two primary light councils, and she represents one of them. And the first pillar spirit that I met when I was 10 represents the other one. And so one of them is, you know, people. One of them is people, and they look like people. And they're people that I've known. They're like my soul family. You know, I used to, in Dreamtime, call them my mission team. They're all, you know, there's a group of 18 of us, and we travel together and we support each other. And the other one is sort of these polar spirits, or these kind of
Light,
pillars of light,
pillars of
the
light.
guardians or the guides.
Right. Like the one you saw through the mirror, somehow connected to the mirror.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh man. This has happened again where I feel like asking you a lot of questions. So let's use our last section here just for all that I'm sitting with. Man, I just want to go deeper into that because it's such a deep longing in myself, and I have the experience of believing and trusting in things that I don't necessarily have a direct experience of yet. Right? So I'm very curious in terms of these things. And also, I don't think that we all should have, and I'm curious to hear what you think, like maybe we would just experience these things differently, because I've been hearing for many years people having spirit guides, and I've been sitting in meditations, and it's not really I've not really connected to it. So maybe it's gonna happen one day, and maybe it's gonna stay curiosity. Who knows? But for you, you're explaining it like a few of your guides have a human shape, others are more light beings. How does it work? When do you ring them up, and how do they guide you? How does it work, your cooperation?
Mm-hmm. Well, in my experience with my work, I mean, that's who I primarily work with when I'm working with a client. As I work with them, I work with their energy field and the spirits that support them.
So just, can you have to break it down for me? So you say this is how you primary. So that means do you channel them? Do you call them in? How does it work?
Yeah, so I call them in. I don't use the term channeling very often, although one could call it that. And to answer a greater question that you asked about, like how I went from having these sort of like out of the box experiences to doing what I do now, that's really because of the training I went through with my teacher. And so when I became, there's a lot of stories here, but I basically became a healer. Early in my 20s, I had a big healing crisis, and it changed my path from theater. I went to school for theater, and it changed my path towards healing. And those two paths had always been running parallel for me.
Wow.
Performance and the arts and science and healing had always been like these parallel tracks. And in college, I had chosen theater because I knew at that point, I knew enough about the medical system. I was like, I think I'm not supposed to be like a doctor. I always thought I was supposed to be a doctor, but I worked in enough hospital settings. I was like, these aren't my people, and this isn't my path. So I chose theater, and I actually learned a lot about shamanism from theater, because I believe in theater as a very shamanic practice of creating realities and following spirit forth. And as a director, would like guide my client, guide my students into a meditation to meet their character and like learn how to integrate with their character and bring that energy in, but also let that energy out. But so in my early 20s, I had a healing crisis, turned towards healing. I went to get a massage therapy degree so that I could just start working with people. But as soon as I laid my hands on people, I started to have visions of all sorts of things. Memories and traumas and all sorts of stuff. And I knew that I wasn't trained to do that kind of work. I was like, okay, massage therapy trained me really well how to work with the body. They didn't talk a whole lot about all this other stuff I'm encountering.
No, you were just psychically open for it, right? You were psychically open for it, and so it came to you.
Yeah, and I didn't know how to contain a session. I didn't know how to integrate my energy with other people's energy, and then integrate my energy. And so I was getting sick a lot.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Yeah, it was really impacting me in a negative way.
Yeah.
So I went to find my teacher. I moved from New York City to Portland, Oregon, where I felt my teacher was. And then I met her within 6 months. And I started working with her. And I would say the thing, what she described to me upon our first meeting is she's like, you have this really amazing spaceship with a lot of buttons, and you have no idea how to operate it.
Yeah.
So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for like an operation manual, which is true. And so she taught me through practice how to open a circuit, is what we call it. So how to activate a space. And we use the 4 directions and the 4 elementals to do that. So it's really a relationship building process with the elements themselves and the like spirits of the elements to create a 7-point container And to get myself, I use this to get myself into the right brain waves, the right brain wave, basically to connect with the consciousness grid and with other beings. And so for me, when I'm working with clients, that's step number one is sort of activating the space. And step number two is calling them and their spirit team forward. And everyone has energies that protect them and guide them, even if they aren't experiencing them directly. And so I think, for me, when I'm working with a client, I call their highest and brightest counsel to come into the space with us. And sometimes they're coming from pretty far out in the person's field. So I might experience someone like a jawbreaker. I don't know if you guys have this candy, but it's like many layers of color candy on there. So sometimes I experience people like that, where they have many different groupings of spirits that surround them. And some of those beings can be like ancestors that need healing. Or beings that they sort of pick up in the world, or things that can be very loud, and some of them can be beings that we've sort of created to protect ourselves, right? Like in internal family systems, the managers and the firefighters and these voices of criticism, those things can be very loud and very close in. And the council that is the lightest and brightest can be all the way on the edges, sort of holding the whole thing together, but we may not experience them directly.
Who on the outside? I'm sorry for interrupting you. I just want to make sure that I understand. Who are on the outside, did you say?
Often the lightest and brightest council, I experience them as being like on the edges of someone's system, So if I'm opening someone's system and I say, when I see the lightest and brightest council, sometimes they're right there. Sometimes they're there. They're in like close proximity. And sometimes I witness sort of a shuffling of like councils, where like some people are moving out of the way and some people are coming in. And, I invite my clients to like do this, to ask their lightest and brightest council to come close, So for me, like if I see a special number, like a number that I feel like comes to me a lot, that's one of the ways spirit communicates. I think then this is an invitation to wrap my council around me, like in a hug. They're sending me a little hug. And so I envision that they're like a cloak or like a robe that I can, wrap around my shoulders and hug myself with and feel close to them, feel their presence.
I have so much to learn from you. I just have to accept that I'm not going to get all my answers, all my questions answered in this one. But I do want to just say a few things to what you just said. You were talking about the creative performance versus the science, right? Did I hear that correctly? Just from
performance and science were always both my loves.
Yes, and that's in your astrology, because
is it?
Because you have the Aquarius moon in the 8th house, so it goes deep no matter what. But that's could be very scientific, the Aquarius, wanting to find the research and to forward the society to have progression, right? And it's also a classic thing that then you realize, no, this is not for me. I need to leave that society and then find other people who are still in the advancement of society, but in a way that suits your vision better. Yeah. Anyway, I just feel like I'm seeing your chart as you're speaking. Like, that's a really good match, and I can see how you are both. Because of course, Taurus would be a lot more creative, and creating even with your hands as well. And yeah. Anyway, but you said.
I love your knowledge of the astrology is such an important.
That's what I have all floating around here, But you said so many things, MaRiza Rizama. This is so it's really interesting to hear how it works for you, and what you say, that we all have that energy. We all have like as I hear you, it's like an energy blueprint. And then I hear there's a lot of IFS. I'm hearing that with radical self-inclusivity, because that's something that I've heard from IFS before. And I wonder how much of how much have that influenced you, or is it more like, okay, then was actually a match to what you were already working with? And also, is it like the lineage or the branch of IFS that's to do with Robert Faulkner, who I've interviewed a few times, because that seems more to be in the thread of if there are actually spirits here, and like you were talking about ancestors who could kind of attach to your energy, I guess in a way that's not very helpful. I mean, in a way that needs to be cleared. There's a few questions in that. Go ahead.
I will try to be concise. Those are big, beautiful questions. You're going to have to edit out my explosive laughter that always comes out very loud in recordings. I'm so sorry.
I'll turn the volume down.
I know, you're just like, yeah, I'm glad you're going to be editing this. Whoa. Yes. So IFS, to answer the first question, IFS is a great thing that I stumbled upon pretty recently in my work. So I've had a private practice now in healing for 20 years. This is my 20th year.
Wow.
And 18 of those years with the spirit facilitation facet, in process. And I still work with my teacher. We see each other, we trade sessions now, like every week.
Nice.
And so she's still a very important person in my life.
Okay, but I just say one thing before I forget it. That's also very Aquarian of you. You were talking about before that you had a mentee that you are now, you're recommending her as well on Substack. And here you are as well, cooperating with your teacher. That's very Aquarian, that we're all equal. And it's really a part of the new age, I believe. Like that's really beautiful. Just I love that.
Yeah, that's a big thing we're doing, is sort of dismantling the hierarchy of human value that is falsehood that we've been taught. Right. So IFS gave language and sort of a framework that's very digestible, that speaks to the work that I've already been doing for all these years.
Okay.
Right. And so this essential practice of making ourselves a safe place to come home to is a necessary part of trauma rehabilitation. Right.
Yeah.
And so that comes to everything, right? That's us being able to know what we need and advocate for our needs. That is us being able to have boundaries and know that those boundaries are loving towards ourselves and others. That comes to us having language inside of ourselves that's kind.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we are committed to kind languaging, to, sort of the Buddhist practice of Maitri translates into unconditional friendliness towards oneself.
Right. Good. Yeah.
And so that is a real foundation for me. Unconditional friendliness towards oneself. And so being able to become consciously aware of the other voices or other influences that aren't always kind, that can be very critical, whether we're thinking of those as unhealed ancestors or parts of ourselves that we activated as protectors in the manager firefighter realm.
Okay.
As a, young person.
You're like same with that.
Yeah, so it's a framework that really works for some people, and there's a lot of research you can find. And some people are researchers, and sure, there's a thing in people's charts. Right? Like some people, they have to be able to Google it and find, peer-reviewed articles and, find resources for this thing. And so even though, my teacher taught a technique that she called the gates of consciousness, and that, my teacher is both, I would say, a shamanic practitioner. I don't know if she would term it that way, as well as a PhD in psychology. So she's a therapist, and she's also had this training in South America with the Quechuan tradition. So like the descendants of the Incas.
Okay.
And through those different fields, she also has her own direct connection with spirit. And so a lot of what she taught me was through that direct connection, right? And that's also how I work. Neither of us, I think, really work within a tradition, even though we've been informed by these different traditions. We'll work with direct
experience,
insight.
I love that. Yeah.
But she had a technique called the gates of consciousness, which was basically identifying these different sort of gateways that we encounter as we're expanding right into ourselves, and the messages that those gateways contain. And then visualizing that each gateway has like a gatekeeper that's sort of guarding the door. And then you could come up with you could design an antidote or a key to open that door, and also directly address in visionary state the gatekeeper. And it's the same idea as the managers and the firefighters, in the sense that they're all protectors. They all think that they're protecting us, and that the thing they're doing for us is the most helpful, is to keep us small, keep us safe, keep us back, right? And keep the parts of us that feel dangerous away, right? So they kind of hold back the wounded parts of us, the traumatized parts of us, the parts of us that are holding these really burdened ideas about the way things work.
Yeah.
They kind of hold them at bay. And that may be the safest thing when we're children, because when we're young, our safety is based on our ability to be accepted by the people that are raising us and by our communities. And then that's life, right? That's life or death for a young person. We are a species of dependency, right? That is a really interesting part of our species design, is dependency. Something we're technically very uncomfortable with in our modern societies is acknowledging our interdependency.
Yeah.
But as we become adults, the rules change, and we have to update the software, is like how I like to think about, right? So that means healing and resolving these old ways of protecting ourselves that keep us apart from ourselves, and sort of, having the antidote to the gate, or having the conversation with the protector and releasing them of duty. And so that's a somatic exercise I like to do that's through the IFS lens. It's like, find the emotion, any emotion we're having that isn't compassion, curiosity, kindness, all of that emotion's coming from a part, whether it's an exiled part, whether it's a younger part, or whether it's a protector, and so trying to find it and have the conversation in the body can be a really effective thing for people to do. But the goal is, we want no barriers to our ability to love and include and heal all of our parts.
Wow. You are so brilliant in your words and in your, imagery. Yeah, we want no barriers to love. That's kind of what I took away from that last point. Oh, that's really good. Okay. So it doesn't matter how. So I'm also curious, because I'm a Qigong teacher, and you also know Stephen Washington, that I was interviewing a couple of times ago. Do you do Qigong just because you had that also the Chinese part of you?
I have done Qigong.
Yeah.
I love Qigong. And I've also done Tai Chi. My grandparents, my Chinese grandparents, did Tai Chi every morning, very early in the morning. And I always loved, they would stay with us during the summers often in my childhood. And I loved seeing them do their Tai Chi together.
Oh, wow.
And I have done Qigong. I love Stephen's Qigong. I definitely am a part of Lee Harris's portal members. And so I get to do his Qigong every month as part of that membership. And,
nice.
He's brilliant. He's brilliant at it. We both have a dance background. So I danced ballet all throughout my childhood, and we danced, professionally as a young adult and adult. And I love the way he teaches. It's a way that I really understand. Like his understanding of his body is powerful.
Yeah.
The way he teaches Qigong.
And the way that
those,
I don't want to stop from complimenting
energy.
But sorry?
Oh, I'm just saying it moves energy.
Yes.
It's brilliant at moving energy.
And the reason why I'm asking, and a big applause to Stephen Washington, but the reason why I was asking was because there's also that philosophy of having spirits in your organs, and so I was just wondering about that. But when it comes down to it, it's just maybe there's the same experience, and it's just portrayed in many different cultures.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that energy exists, and the way that we interpret it, there's many diverse and true ways to interpret energy or to work with energy, right? So actually the meridian system and the Chinese 5-element theory, like when I was in school in New York, they teach that side by side with Western theories of massage. And I'm really attached to that. And my Chinese family, actually, there's a branch, my mother's mother's father, that branch are all Chinese medical doctors. And so I felt, and I've always felt a very strong connection to them, like energetically. And so when I was in massage therapy school, I feel like that whole line sort of lit up for me. And like, I just knew, I knew it in my body and how to work with meridians.
Wow.
But I think that there's so great ways of working with energies and working with healing. And it's about, I call it our translation device. Like our body, our field is a translation device for energy. Well, energy is all around us. The consciousness field, or what I call dot particles, like the sparks of the divine. I've seen them. They're all around us. They're these little sparks of light that moves around in these sort of clouds, and they coalesce and they make forms. And it's the same energy we use for any form of divination, right? Tarot cards.
Are they constantly there? Are they constantly floating around? Okay.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Okay.
They're everywhere.
So it's
like if you think about like dust in the air and how on a certain day when the light is streaming in a certain way, you see all the little dust particles. And it's not like they just arrived with that beam of light. They're always there. We just don't see them, Jungle. So I think of the dot particles like that, or the truth particles. And so they're all around, and there's these impulses of information coming towards us. And a big part of our intuitive gift coming online, as so many people, like you mentioned, are awakening and coming online and be like, oh, there's all this other stuff going on, right? That may be significant that I want to know about, is the biggest part of that is learning our own translation device. So there's 3 parts of the communication cycle in nature. There's the impulse coming in. There's the reception of the impulse and the translation of it. So the understanding of what the impulse means. And then there's the action or the expression of that into the world, right? That's the cycle. And so a lot of people get hitched up when they don't know how they individually translate energy into understanding in their bodies. And part of that is because people are living up here in their minds. We've created many cultures that put primacy in the mind and say the mind is the greatest tool we have. It's all about the brain. It's how we process information. And they segment off the heart, which can be very confusing and tender and feel dangerous. We segment off the body, especially as women. We're very ashamed of our bellies, and our bodies and our bellies are like where we need. It's our gut. It's where we know. It's where we know. It's our center, right? The hara. This is the center. This is a reflecting pool. What's happening right now is happening in our bellies. So I like to say our mind thinks, our heart knows, and our belly feels.
Yeah.
And we need all of those online in order to translate energy appropriately and to understand it. So everyone does that. We all do that. We just don't all know how to do that. We're not thinking of it. We're not working with that.
And so just to pick you up on that last bit, and we are going to wrap up really soon. This is the very, very last part of this with the belly part. I also studied to become a psychotherapist, and we had an exercise a few days ago where we were to just draw what areas of our body we were uncomfortable with. And I did put something around my stomach because that would be the thing. But I did say, this is cultural shame or norm shame. It's not mine because I accept myself completely, but I feel it like in public. I feel it from the lens of other people. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think of it. I think of the energetic sort of exchange that happens between us as people, especially like a game of tennis or ping pong.
Yeah.
Right. So it's this invisible game where these thought forms, we can think of them as the ball, come out of one person and go to another person, and we return it. And we're having like an energetic game of tennis or ping pong. And the really skilled thing is to recognize when someone serves you a ball that you don't agree with, you don't have to return it.
This is good. Yeah. It's like that's your
And you don't get to
projection.
catch it.
It's your projection, and it doesn't have to do with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't catch the ball. Yeah.
Don't catch the ball. Don't bat it back.
Yeah.
And that's how we change the conversation. It's like we change the script between us. I've had a lot of instances of like this insight or this reality of interacting with strangers, especially who are giving off a certain sort of like, this is what you think about me, or this is what I think about you. And for me to be like, no, I don't actually. Like, I don't think that about you. So I'm not going to return that ball. And then it's like there's an interruption in this sort of like script of expectancy.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm a person that people think that this way. It's like, so sometimes I'll see something like that in someone's field and I just throw it out. I just send it out. I'm like, that can be cleared. Like, I don't need to participate in that. They don't need to carry that around either.
I feel that's actually what we started to talk about, really, and that is, at least that's the part of the transformational work that we've come to today, to speak about that there's this thing that we take ourselves to be. There's this identity that we feel that this is describing who I am, and then you're saying when that gets interrupted and disrupted, then it becomes shaky, and it's also a healing path, really.
Because when it becomes shaky, then we can see it.
Yeah,
it's like comfortable, right? And you can see it, and then we can change it.
Yeah.
If we're not aware of it, if we can't see it or perceive it or feel it, then it just perpetuates.
Yeah.
We can't kind of consciously collaborate with the evolution, right? Evolution, I think, is always happening in one way or another. But we want to be, for those of us, I call it on team evolution. For those of us who are consciously on team evolution, like we want to evolve towards more love, connection.
Yes.
Yeah, team evolution.
Yes.
And on that team, we want to be conscious collaborators.
Yeah. Wow.
Because so we have to be able to receive it, to participate.
I feel like that is really a moon, a moon in Aquarius in the 8th house. The 8th house, the conscious, making the unconscious conscious is something you would say about the 8th house, and then the Aquarius is all about collaboration. So anyway, that's really beautiful. MaRiza, Rizama, the well, a full awakening, all of your names. Thank you so much. I really feel like you are you're such a gift. You have had this very special path to come to where you are. I mean, in a way we all have, but this is I just want to honor that, because it's like you've had all of the traditions that I'm now like learning about. You've had that in your lineage. So of course that's gonna open up for your energy and for what you are able to, if not channel, then be in contact with. So it makes a lot of sense when you put it like that to me, that it's not out of nothing that you were having all of these experiences when you were a child. There's actually, there's a background there. People clearing, right? Do you see it like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. We are an expression of our ancestors. We're an expression of our ancestors in all the ways. And I think that's every morning. I admit it this morning, I have an ancestor altar that I light in the morning, and I like to drink a cup of water for the ancestors and consider them. But I always thank the ancestors of my body, because that's one aspect, but also the ancestors of my incarnations. That's another aspect. And the ancestors of the land on which I inhabit. Because we're receiving from all of them, right? We're receiving from those that came before for this body, that have seeded this body with all of their desires for expression, all of their wounding and unresolved trauma, with all of their hopes and dreams, right? And we are a seed bank for all of that, right, in ourselves. But we are also an expression of our incarnational path. Right. So I honor my past incarnations for, and it's not just a it's not just a straight line, it's a spiraling, fractaling, concurrent, sort of like evolving expression. But I walk with them too, right? What they have done and what they have realized, it has accumulated in me, in my consciousness, right? And then, of course, I'm receiving all the time from the ancestors of this land, both the human ancestors and the more than human ancestors that live in this land. And I'm contributing to the descendants of all those past as well, the descendants of my body, the descendants of my incarnations, the descendants of this land. And so, yeah, it isn't from nothing.
No.
Right? Nothing comes from nothing. Everything comes from everything.
It just makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. Thank you so much. And people can find you. I'm going to link to you. And do you do sessions, or is it only writing? You offer sessions?
No, I love my sessions. I love my sessions. Yeah, I do sessions with individuals and also couples.
Okay.
That was something that I got certified in a few years ago. I was like, man, intimate relationships, they always show up. Right? And transformational healing. Whoa. If that's not where we find the depths.
Yeah, like you were mentioning that we are social per nature, right? So of course it comes up when we are closely connected to someone. Yeah. Okay, so you do sessions.
So I do that. Yeah. But I also train facilitators now. So I'm sort of paying it forward.
So you can learn to become what you're doing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's really, really fun. It's really fun sort of taking these 18 years of working as a facilitator and sort of boiling it down to
how long
modules of growth, like can we really train in working the spirit in this way?
How long does it take
to many different fields?
Sorry, I'm speaking over you. I'm curious how long it takes, because it took you 18 years. How long would it take for an ordinary person?
Well, I have 2 levels of training, and each level is 8 months long.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, everyone's going to become themselves, it's just a way of training oneself to work with the consciousness field and with the spirit and develop those relationships that help us anchor an activated space, and to think of energy in this way, the way that we sort of come together and it's and come apart. It's a beautiful thing. And I have people with many different walks of life who are coming on these small cohort trainings. So these little small group trainings that we do. And it's really beautiful to see the way that it's being applied to people's existing vocations and paths of passion.
Beautiful, beautiful. Do you wanna see me again?
Yeah, I'd love to
come back, because
I had so much fun.
Yeah, I feel there's such a well, and there's just so much in you. So if you want to, let's speak again, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for now.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're so welcome.